Have we forgotten that China is in fact an aggressive dictatorship, one that bans democracy? Well, Andrew Hastie is a Liberal MP and Chairman of Parliament's Intelligence Committee. He has warned for a long time that China is a threat and has now written an essay with the title, "What is to be done?" warning that regimes like China are actually waging a form of warfare against us. I'm joined now by Andrew Hastie. Andrew, it's great to see you again. Listen, before we get to your very powerful essay, I want to ask you about those New Zealand pilots and medics who risked their lives to fly in and help victims of the White Island volcano. And I ask you because you risked your own life as an SAS soldier and officer in combat in Afghanistan. You probably know better than most. What goes through the mind of men when they do this, when they get the chance, the courage? Where do they get it from to do what would terrify other people?
Well, Andrew, I think it's a wonderful example of the human spirit, and I think a wonderful example of moral courage, because they were up high in helicopters and they had to make a decision themselves to go down there. The adrenaline would have been pumping, but they still would have known the consequences of another eruption. And so it wasn't spontaneous courage, it was deliberate courage and moral courage ultimately that took them to the island. And I think it's a really wonderful example to come out of this terrible tragedy.
But where does that courage come from, Andrew? What's going through your mind? You're thinking, crikey, I could die, or just put that out of your mind? What do you do?
Well, I think ultimately caring for your neighbour is what drives a lot of courage. Of course, there's training and there's individual initiative, but when you're working as part of a team, you want to look after your mates, and I suspect that the people in the helicopters who went down there were keen to look after their neighbours who were stranded down on the island and bring people off. So again, a very high form of moral courage which we can all admire. So
I guess what you're saying, the key is focus on the mission, on the others, not on yourself, and then you'll find the courage.
Absolutely. It's about sacrifice, it's about dying to self and putting others before your own needs.
Andrew, to your essay on China, what is China really up to?
Well, Andrew, first of all, I should say the essay was written for the Henry Jackson Society and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, which is a German think tank. It was written for a European audience, and it's talking about political warfare which is being conducted by authoritarian powers. Now, I name Russia and China in that essay specifically, and authoritarian regimes, are revisionist and expansionist. Revisionist insofar as they want to undermine the global rules-based order and refashion it to serve their own ends. Expansionist in that not only do they want to enlarge their geographical boundaries potentially, but also take an ideological struggle abroad. And so when I talk about China in that context, I think for some time now it's become pretty clear that we are experiencing foreign interference in this country, and my essay was reflecting on our experience for a European audience and demonstrating that it is possible to take action. You don't have to be reactive, and you can take measures, as this government has done, to shore up your sovereignty and protect your democratic institutions.
What do you think China's game is, though? What's it want?
Well, I think ultimately they want to supplant US power and influence in the Indo-Pacific, and perhaps beyond that. We are a close US ally, we're a very resource-rich country, and I think in terms of fulfilling those strategic objectives, Australia is a really important part of that larger ambition. So I think it's important for China to have us as a close ally. Of course, we share different values. Our regimes are entirely different. Theirs being a communist totalitarian regime, ours an open democratic government. And so that's very difficult. And so, there are ways to compel others to do your will. Political warfare is one of them, using political means with hostile intent to get someone or a government to do your will. And I think that was at the heart of what I was writing about.
Look, I think one of the themes in your essay that I think is really important, let me put it more out there, I guess. We used to think of warfare as shooting. That's what warfare was about. I think there's now increasingly a new form of warfare where the aim is still the same, to get political ascendancy, etc., but it doesn't involve what we are looking for, which is military. It involves other things. And I listed some of the instances in the intro. Is that how you see it too? Have we been slow to wake up to the fact that there's a new form of warfare going on, still meant to subvert us and to magnify China's power?
That's right. So what we're really talking about is deep-seated ideological differences. Australia has come from a Judeo-Christian Western tradition. We have held to just war principles, so we've always seen war as something that we do as a last resort. War is a rupture or an aberration of peace, and so when we go to war, as we have done in the past, we do it to restore peace. Authoritarian regimes like Russia and China, deep in their DNA is Marxist ideology, which doesn't hold to war and peace as being two distinct spheres. Rather, they see life as continuous struggle. And so that struggle goes on during times of peace. We think of peace as a time of prosperity, and it makes us vulnerable if we're not prepared to meet some of these challenges, which I think we're facing here from China and Europe itself from Russia more broadly.
Well, why did you call your essay What Must Be Done? Because that's the title of a famous essay by Lenin, the Russian Bolshevik revolutionary who became the dictator of Russia.
Well, that's right. I like history, and it's always good to make little historical references. But the essay, What Is to Be Done, it's not just a diagnosis of what I see as the problem, but we've also got to take action. And I list off 7 or 8 points which I think are worthwhile having a discussion about. They're discussion points, and the purpose of the essay is to get other like-minded countries to think about these sorts of issues. Number one, we first of all have to articulate the problem, diagnose it, and confirm and affirm the values that we hold to. That's the number one step, and there are a series of others. I'm happy to talk to you about them now.
You give me what is to be done.
Sure. Well, the second is we need to really work on the coalition that has been formed over the last 100 years through peace and war. Now more than ever, democracies have to group together. We have to help out countries which are a little bit further behind. Of course, in 2017, the Australian government introduced the espionage and foreign interference legislation. We banned Huawei from 5G, which was a big decision, preserving our digital sovereignty for future generations. And just this year, Prime Minister Scott Morrison introduced the University Counter Foreign Interference Task Force, and last week again announced a new interagency Counter Foreign Interference Task Force to basically give prosecutorial and operational teeth to the legislative framework. So we're ahead of other countries, and with those, as part of a coalition, we need to reach back and help others do the same sorts of things. We need to share intelligence, share technical expertise, and Andrew, it comes down to basically schoolyard tactics. If you're getting picked on by a bully, then you've got to find mates, group together and push back.
And that's in exactly the context that the Prime Minister is going to India next month, wanting a free trade deal with this giant democracy, because we need to get a broader range of partners in business so that we're not so unbelievably dependent on Chinese trade, because they've got us over a barrel that way. So I congratulate the Prime Minister on that, and I congratulate you, Andrew, on your essay. There's a link to it on my blog for those that want to read it in full. I recommend that you do. Andrew Hastie, thank you so much indeed for your time.